Welcome to the first episode of Trash Talk. I've got Nick beside me where we take you through everything that's going on in the world of combat sports, from MMA to boxing to WWE, even street fights with influencers. Jack Doherty and Neon just got into a bit of a punch on recently. I don't know if you saw that.
Do we cover Kimbo Slice type fighting as well?
Yeah, backyard fights, Western Sydney fights. We'll cover everything, anything that's happening across the world of social media in the combat sports arena. We're going to be bringing to you every single week. Nick, I'm looking forward to the new show.
I'm very much looking forward to it. Most importantly, WWE. We're big WWE fans, we're big boxing fans, and we've gotten into the UFC. I think we're the UFC guys in Australia, so it's natural we start talking about it a bit more.
Look, we've been to some of the biggest events. We've been to UFC 296. We were just in Newark, New Jersey for UFC 302. UFC 303 is coming up this week. That's been through a lot of changes. So we're here to bring you the news across Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everything on the internet right now. Dana White's Instagram, anything you can think of, we're going to be covering it today. So first off, we have a segment, right? We're going to give you the hot take from an anonymous MMA user, the MMA hot take. This week's MMA hot take: is Alex Pereira better than Khabib all time?
I'd say no way. Alex Pereira has become probably the best fighter in the UFC today, taking fights on short notice, finishing fights early, fighting anyone, anywhere, anytime. But that's recency bias. Khabib Nurmagomedov is one of the greatest fighters of all time. Never lost a round. Okay, maybe lost one to Conor. Never bled in the octagon. Total dominance against his opponents. Yes, he might not have the resume, but when you're dominating people and people are dodging you, how can your resume be up there?
I would say, I agree, recency bias for sure, because we've been seeing Alex Pereira be the reliable MVP of the UFC right now. Okay, he's taking fights on short notice. He's stepping in. He's pretty much Dana's guy right now when they need someone to step in and take over for a Conor McGregor. But in saying that, the guy has had only 2 fights to go on to decision in the last 2 years. Since 2022, he has been knocking out and TKOing his opponents over the last 2 years. Like he's one of the best performers in the UFC. Khabib, yes, was very dominant too, but does his resume stack up to the recent, I'd say, light heavyweight bouts that Alex Pereira
Being
had?
the only thing that...
The middleweight bouts that he's had. He's gone up against Israel Adesanya twice in the UFC and outside of the UFC.
Okay, the only thing that Pereira has over Khabib is being a 2-division champion. Khabib never went up in weight, and that's going to be the only thing that Pereira beats him on. But do you recall Khabib ever being knocked out dead on the mat?
Never.
No. Pereira got knocked out by Adesanya. Okay, so he nearly got knocked out in the first fight against Adesanya as well. There's no clear cut saying that he's even better, that much better than Adesanya.
There's the argument that Khabib called it a day while he was at the top. Pereira right now, 36, 37, in the prime of his career, and still wanting to put on crazy fights, still taking the risk that Khabib never took. I'm not going to say he's outright better than Khabib. Khabib is, I think, one of the all-time GOATs, up there with John Jones. So, again, I'm going to say no, but his career's not done yet.
The only way Pereira can be better than Khabib all time is if he goes up to heavyweight and beats John Jones or beats anyone for that heavyweight title. That's the only way he can be better than him.
Khabib would come back and fight?
just to put himself back in the convo?
I mean, you saw him in Islam's corner. He says he keeps fit. He's been going at Daniel Cormier for being fat.
He doesn't look very fit. He just trains.
But
I don't
he
think
trains.
he's fit.
But Islam says he's continually training with the Eagle boys. They're in the gym every day. They're putting in work. He looks good. He was on the treadmill with him. He didn't look like he lost a step on the treadmill.
Yeah, that's very easy to do. I mean, I think once he gets his
I
diet
can't
right,
see
he
Daniel
can come
Cormier
back.
on a treadmill. Have you seen Daniel Cormier on a treadmill recently?
He's on the golf carts.
He's on the golf carts, exactly right. Okay, now let's look at something that just happened over the weekend. Was UFC Saudi Arabia. It was their inaugural UFC fight night in Saudi Arabia. I think they eventually want to bring a pay-per-view there. But
they will. They'll definitely bring a pay-per-view.
Let's look at the biggest takeaways from UFC Saudi Arabia, starting with Johnny Walker losing to the desert once again. Okay, he has the worst track record, whether it's in Abu Dhabi, now Saudi Arabia. The guy can't catch a break, and the worst part about it is when he gets knocked out, especially more recently, it looks like an animated knockout where he's knocked out into oblivion. He takes the worst possible shots, and he's knocked out straight to the mat. This knockout was brutal.
What's the Joe Rogan line? He's been sent into the shadow realm.
Yeah.
He loves to drop that. And Johnny Walker, every time he gets knocked out, you're worried that he might have torn his ACL because he just flops his body back so badly. And you genuinely feel sorry for him because when people watch the UFC, they say it's an animalistic sport. They say you could die in there. He looks like he was close to death on that knockout.
They're gladiators. It looked like he almost tore his ACL in there as well. But look, very tough for Johnny Walker to take another knockout. The last fight that he fought in the desert was a really weird stoppage that he wanted to start punching on with the referee as well, which was very funny. So again, I think he's 0-3 in the desert, the poor bloke. He has said that he's got to go back to the drawing board. I don't know where he goes from here. He's on the brink of, look, another really bad knockout loss, and I think that's his UFC career done.
Well, as a light heavyweight, he looks like he's the perfect fighter. He's got tall, he's got reach, he's got range, but somehow every time he fights, he's getting brutally beaten. You don't want to see someone get knocked out like that. And, you know, people talk about when Volk got his head kick and got knocked out by Topuria, the effect that has on your head. Johnny Walker surely now has had 3 brutal knockouts that I've seen that have gone viral. Surely the knockouts have taken a toll on your head and it's killing you. Like it's gonna take years off your life, is what I'm saying. Johnny, just think about the rest of your life.
Yeah, definitely, Johnny Walker. Take some time off. Relax. Don't go to the desert again. Maybe have a fight. Maybe in Brazil. Target that as your next fight. But I guess we'll see where that is. Big takeaway as well. Is Turk Al-Sheikh the worst shadow boxer we've ever seen in the UFC?
Okay, to start off, in the defense of Turk Al-Sheikh, I've thought about, one day if the camera ever shows me in the crowd at a UFC, what do? I throw up the peace sign? Do I, do a little... You said a lot of fighters just do the fist.
Yeah.
He thought, okay, best decision here, I'll do a shadow box. But it was the worst shadow box of all time. He looked like he was a toddler.
It was the way that he was holding his fist. He looked like he's never thrown a punch before, Turk Al-Sheikh. But his boxing knowledge is unbelievable. I want to say the takeaway from this is that John Anik did interview him next to Dana White, and they were saying what is planned for future Saudi Arabia events. He's bringing everything in there, whether it's WWE, they've got the PFL already there. They're doing events in Los Angeles, Las Vegas with Riyadh season. So he says he's aiming for 2 power slaps. He wants to see a woman's fight in the UFC at the next UFC Saudi Arabia. And there's also going to be another UFC Saudi Arabia. I think it's going to be bigger and better than it once was. They're kind of, with a lot of things falling through, he wants a bigger card there. Dana White said yes, so you got to think 2 power slaps. And then all of a sudden, he pulls out that he wants his good friend Zack Snyder, director of the Justice League, to direct the UFC movie. And then, he said, Zack Snyder, good friend of Turk Al-Sheikh.
He
wouldn't think they would have got along.
He made sure to mention that he was a good friend of Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully he told him the Justice League was a terrible movie.
So are we going to get a Never Back Down 3 Saudi Arabia edition?
I just want to know, Turk Al-Sheikh, you have all this, obviously, Saudi Arabian money behind you. You are organising all these world-class events in Saudi Arabia. What's the end game here? He said he wants to buy all the boxing promotions. Does he want to buy the UFC as well? Is that on his to-do list?
I don't think Endeavour is ever going to sell the UFC with TKO Group right now. It's firing on all cylinders. They just announced a big fight week in Vegas with Power Slap on. They got live music on in Fremont Square. It's going nuts.
But the stature of Turk Al-Sheikh, Dana White is a very overwhelming personality. He's very loud, owns the room. But next to Turk Al-Sheikh, he looked like he was his subordinate. Yeah. Turk Al-Sheikh was saying, yeah, I'm going to bring 2 UFCs here. It's like Dana doesn't have a decision. He doesn't have any word or any thought of how this is going to go.
Ultimately, it's a negotiating table. He says he wants to have a meeting with him and Zack Snyder for the movie. I don't know how that's going to go. But you're right. He was kind of... There's some customs that Dana White probably had to get used to. Turk Al-Sheikh was holding his hand, walking him around.
That was fun.
In Saudi Arabia. Probably one of the funniest clips from the week. But look, that means more to come in Saudi Arabia for the UFC and combat sports, which is great.
Right, Turk Al-Sheikh is becoming the Dana White of combat sports.
Okay.
Boxing, UFC, MMA, whatever you want, he's the man.
Let's go through some of the results from Saudi Arabia because we've got to get to our boy, our Aussie Bobby Knuckles. But Shara the Bullet, is he a fraud? Is he what everyone's making him out to be? Do you believe the hype train for Shara?
I think his fights have been underwhelming to what people have expected, but it's only his second fight in the UFC. People have got to pump the brakes on the hype that they created for him. Yes, he does talk a bit of trash. Yes, he obviously has some skirmishes outside the octagon, which people aren't the biggest fans of. But if you're expecting more from him, that's on you. I'm just saying, give him time to really find his own in the UFC. It's obviously a different level and different caliber of talent in the UFC, so he's got to become accustomed to that. Give him time. I don't think he's a fraud. I just don't think he's as good as what people thought.
Well, I don't think his performances have been backed up the talk. That's all I'm saying, especially the hype from UFC Twitter. Okay, you saw MMA gurus going at him and celebrating even Robert Whittaker because he definitely goes against the Dagestanis. But look, I think he was saved quite a bit there from referee Mark Goddard. There was instances where there was a clear grab of the fence, no deduction of the point. Probably separating them early in the clinch as well. Definitely a little bit of a bias towards him. Favorable Saudi Arabian crowd. The last time he fought was in Abu Dhabi as well. So again, I'd like to see him get a true test.
I
at middleweight.
don't like the narrative of the referee or the UFC has bias towards him. There's been so many instances where the referees have let things slide. Leon Edwards grabbing the fence against Kamaru Usman. Things happen. Referees miss stuff. It doesn't mean there's a clear bias towards one fighter.
I'm just saying I've seen better refereeing performances from Mark Goddard. And in saying that his opponent wasn't anything up to scratch. Offered nothing. It was like a standing crash test dummy that was just copping the Shara kicks all day. Didn't offer him anything. I want to see him get tested in that division. And then in saying that, Bo Nickel went straight to Twitter and said, give me Bullet.
That would be a great fight. And I think Shara kind of accepted the challenge as well. He said, I'm a fighter from Dagestan. You don't even contest me.
He said, I'm not worried. Dagestan, we wrestle, we strike. I've got everything. I'm not scared of American wrestling.
I think that's what
that would be, honestly, a fight that Bo Nickel, I think, would elevate him. It would draw a lot of eyes. I'd like to see that. Mate, Abu Dhabi's around the corner.
Well, I think that's where it would be. I don't know if Bo Nickel will fight in Abu Dhabi, but Shara can't go to America, so it would have to be an Abu Dhabi card. I think Shara definitely backs this up and fights in Abu Dhabi. That's going to be in October, late October. That's definitely when he's fighting. I don't know if he can handle a big match like that yet, Shara. I'd like to see maybe 1 or 2 more fights before he goes on to that big, money fight or big stakes fight where he can really push himself up into the rankings.
I'm saying I'd like to see a USA versus Dagestan wrestler. Okay, yes, Shara's not, he's more of a striker, but again, the USA Dagestani rivalry, that'd be great hype for Bo Nickel as well, who needs an opponent to test him.
Without touching too much on Robert Whittaker, has there been now, looking at Shara and then looking at Ikram, have the Dagestani aura or, the hype around them kind of fallen off a bit? They were seen unstoppable. If you were
Definitely
a betting man, the rule was always don't bet on women's UFC and don't bet against the Dagestani. They're the 2 rules of betting in the UFC, and it looks like they kind of lost on the weekend. Ikram lost. Surprising to me, because I'm always the guy that says, you know what, if they're from Dagestan, put the house on them.
Maybe it is. I don't know. I just think it's levels of experience. You saw with Whittaker, Ikram coming in on short notice. Again, hasn't had that many fights in the UFC either. I think there's just levels to the game. But looking at someone that I think was an upset in Saudi Arabia, Volkov. Volkov beating Pavlovich while he was getting his hair cut in his corner, I think was bloody hilarious. But this is something that Volkov was in search of throughout his whole UFC career. He was looking for that big win against a top 5 UFC contender in that weight division, and he finally got it. Does this mean Volkov earns a title shot down the line?
Well, who else in the division can he verse? Tom Aspinall's versing Curtis Blades. John Jones is holding out for Stipe. Cyril Gane, from all reports, is ducking everybody. So really, the only fight that he could possibly make to ascend himself into title contention is versing Cyril Gane. But Cyril Gane's been a pussy and ducking everyone, so you can't really say, okay. So if Cyril Gane doesn't want to fight anybody, Volkov fights Aspinall or John Jones for the title. That's the way it has to go.
I'm saying Volkov is now on a 4-fight win streak. We saw what he did to Taito Ivasa.
Destroyed him.
He's definitely in discussions for, I think, that title contention. But right now, the whole division is in disarray because of John Jones.
He's holding up the division.
John Jones is holding up the division. Everyone's rumored saying that, he's going to fight Stipe and possibly retire. Okay, and that's probably the likely outcome. I don't want to see it happen. But then, say he goes on to beat Stipe, okay? Then they're talking about Tom Aspinall. So Volkov's really waiting on John Jones. He's waiting on Tom Aspinall. There's an interim fight already happening in Manchester. I think the best case scenario for Volkov is fighting someone like Cyril Gane, okay? And that being a number 1 title shot for the interim title.
Well, the fact that he
or Jailton Almeida. Because Jailton Almeida had just avenged his loss against Curtis Blades. We saw that in Newark, okay? Yeah. And it's a bit of a mismatch for Volkov. He's got to go up against Jailton Almeida's wrestling. I think that would make sense.
If I'm Volkov, or I'm his manager, and I'm advising him what to do, hold out for a title fight. Don't verse somebody below you in the rankings. Beating Pavlovich is very significant. Pavlovich is one of the best fighters, young heavyweights in the UFC.
So you'd wait it out?
Wait it out. Why commit to something when you know it can just... You've seen fighters in the past, Tony Ferguson, who didn't need to fight, and then they cost themselves title opportunities in the future. It's not worth it. And Volkov, everyone on Twitter was looking at him clean-shaven and somehow looks scarier. You always see him with the beard. Him, clean-shaven, getting his hair combed in the middle of the octagon. It's one of the scariest sights of the UFC. If you're Pavlovich and you saw that across the octagon, you know the fight was over then.
Anyway, I want to see Volkov in title contention. I think he's earned it. I guess we're going to have to wait and see what happens in Manchester and what's going on with John Jones. That's pretty much a done deal for November 9th, I think, at Madison Square Garden. So I guess he's going to have to wait and see. I'd wait it out as well personally. But let's go over to the Aussie. Robert Whittaker, getting that done in 1 round, made quick work of him under 2 minutes. It was great to see. And I want to say, what is next for Robert Whittaker?
Well, going into this fight, I said it was a lose-lose because beating Hamzat probably ascends him to a title shot. Beating Ikram doesn't do much for him, but it was a good showing. Knocking someone out in the first round is awesome.
I think it does a lot. It does a lot more than what people think because he showed he's got balls to take the short notice fight. He said, look, he prepared for a wrestler in Hamzat anyway. But I think this is the hungriest we've seen Robert Whittaker in a while. But especially after that Draicus Duplessis fight, he's been on a bit of a roll. You can look, he stepped it up. He was ready to go. He came out. You saw the mean mug as soon as he walked out. He was pumped up. Makes quick work at him. Now says he's fresh. Okay? Says he doesn't take much damage.
If we're going now next steps, that division is in a bit of a disarray as well. Duplessis versus Adesanya for Perth. Whittaker can only really verse Strickland to ascend himself to a title shot or hold out for a title fight himself. But the thing is, if you're looking at the rankings, Sean Strickland deserves the title shot first. He's the former champion.
Former champ deserves a rematch. 100%.
He's already had the fight in the division, beating Costa. He did the company fight. Yeah. So if you're Whittaker, you might have to hold out to after the Strickland fight. So
listen, but okay, the immediate question that was asked of him straight away from Daniel Cormier was, would you be willing to be the backup? Who deserves to be the backup more, Sean Strickland or Robert Whittaker for Perth?
Well, Sean Strickland was hobbling backstage after this last fight.
He's on vacation right now. I don't know if you've seen him. He looks like he's putting on a bit of weight too. He's enjoying his time. I think he's doing a bit of a
I feel like Whittaker's the fresher fighter and would more likely be the backup fighter, especially because he's Australian as well.
He said, listen, I'm Aussie. It's in my backyard. It's in Perth. It makes sense for Robert Whittaker to be the backup. I just think Sean Strickland's been a bit hard done by, being the former champ and not really losing to Draicus.
Strickland can't do anything. I don't think Strickland needs to be the backup, take a fight on short notice. Not worth it for him. He can hold out for a title fight. Whittaker, it would make sense to be the backup. And in Perth, it makes sense. Unless he's going to be on the card in a separate fight by himself, which, if you didn't take any damage, why aren't you backing up? We need to bring back an era of activity of fighters. We need to bring back fighters backing up, every 2-3 months.
I think he definitely has a fight in him this year. I don't know if it's for the title. He's definitely been promised now a title shot. Whether it was his last fight against Costa, now people are saying, oh, let's have him versus Strickland, #1 contender. No, listen, they've done enough. Both of them have done enough. Okay, Strickland took the Costa fight. Yeah, Whittaker put his hand up and said, I will fight Hamzat. I am now the boogeyman in the division. Hamzat drops out. Okay, you miss out. The game moves past you. He proved himself. He knocked out Ikram very quickly. I think give either one of them a title shot. I'm not opposed to it. They can both wait for each other.
The biggest problem here is Dana White. He's promised title shots to just about anybody. Hamzat versus Kamaru Usman, that was supposed to be a #1 contenders fight. Robert Whittaker versus Hamzat, that's another one, #1 contenders. Draicus versus Slinger, it's #1 contender. Everything's #1 contender, but no one's getting the title fight. Okay, so Dana's got to be a bit more, just shut your mouth. Don't promise people anything.
I'm just saying, even though I'm an Aussie and I'd love to see Bobby Knuckles, I think the hungriest he's ever been right now. I think Strickland deserves a title shot first, being the former champ, okay? And then Whittaker can obviously make the move from there. I don't know if he takes a fight in between that or he just waits for a title fight. But being in Perth, he should be the backup fighter, but Strickland deserves his rematch first.
If Adesanya wasn't fighting for the title, realistically, he would fight for Whittaker. That'd be the fight that, okay, Adesanya needs to beat someone that's on the come up, and Whittaker needs to fight a former champion. That would be like the perfect fight, but Adesanya's just ascended straight to the title fight. So that's what's caused everything to go, be so jumbly.
Well, let's take a look at what's happening in the world of social media. Something that took the world by storm that was actually on another Australian show, Submission Radio, shout out to those blokes, love their work. They had Ali Abdulaziz on, okay? And they said, Ali, what's next for Kayla Harrison? Okay, because she mauled Holly Holm. And it looked like it was the most one-sided women's fight I've ever seen.
Well, she's basically got the stature of a man. She's got the biggest back I've ever seen for a woman, and she's got the strength to just overpower everyone she versus.
Well, Ali said, I think Merab or Aljamain Sterling is next for Kayla Harrison. And they were like shocked. They were like, what? They're men. I don't know if you know that, but he goes, look, honestly, it's not fair. No girls want to fight her after what she did to Holly. And he thinks they're a good matchup, especially at that weight. Aljamain Sterling immediately took to Twitter and said, look, this is not what I signed up for. I don't want to fight any women. But in saying that, could we ever see in the UFC a male versus women fight?
No, this is not WWE. This is real life, okay?
Look, China, shout out to China in WWE. She stood up, was one of the first women in the Royal Rumble. Beth Phoenix has been in the Royal Rumble. I know this is staged wrestling, But when we're talking hand-to-hand combat in the UFC, Dana White is steering clear of that. But would it make for a good matchup? Could Kayla Harrison fight anyone in that weight division?
I know I just gave Kayla her flowers before, saying she's one of the biggest and most dominant females I've ever seen. But facing a man is a completely different thing. I don't want to hear Abdulaziz say this. The disrespect he's putting on Merab and Aljamain. They would kill her. The power, the strength, the speed.
Mate,
there's no chance that they could keep up with them.
I've seen her throwing bloody Alex Pereira around while they're training together. She can
That's
wrestle.
playful.
She
That's
can
playful.
wrestle with the best of them. It's not like a Ronda Rousey and, you know, her striking's not up to it. This girl can go, and she looks very strong.
I think
I'm not making the argument, I want to see a male versus woman. It would be interesting. And as a case point example, Craig Jones is doing it in jiu-jitsu. Okay, so if they're willing to do it at a jiu-jitsu level, I know he's still funding it and they're making it happen, but why not let's see it in the UFC?
Okay, I'm just saying, as an example, firstly, he shot too high. He should have gone a couple weight divisions below. He should have gone maybe to Pantoja's division, because at least that's somewhat more believable. But even then, looking at Steve Erceg, an Australian who's in the lowest weight division possible, the striking ability of him, he would kill her. If you've got that level of manly power, women can't keep up with it. There's a reason they're separated. That's why they're separated.
You'll find a lot of these women sometimes train with the men in these gyms. And Ali Abdelaziz backs his client saying, look, she can't face any women right now. Let's bring on the men. I think we can win big in there. We can win big in those divisions. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but it was a funny suggestion. And I wonder if they ever go down that route.
Aljamain just went up in weight. I don't think he's going to be fighting females anytime soon. He's more focused on improving his stature in that division that he just moved up into.
Well, looking at Israel Adesanya, he beat the UFC in announcing his fight, something that never happens. But I think if you're as big as Izzy with 8 million followers on Instagram, you can announce your own fight if you want.
He gets the pass. You're not going to get the hell.
Dana White just said, look, it looks like Adesanya just announced his fight. But that was pretty much the rumoured fight for Perth, which is now confirmed. Draicus has said he's agreed to the fight. Israel Adesanya versus Draicus du Plessis in Perth. Is this the fight you want to see? And has it been enough time off for Adesanya?
It's been more than enough time off. In fact, he should have fought once before this fight if he actually wanted to fight for the title. He's getting, obviously, favourable treatment by the UFC, which I personally believe he deserves. Yep. He's a former champion. He's a superstar. And when you're a superstar, you dictate your own terms.
Well, that drew eyes to UFC Perth. That's going to obviously be the main event for Perth. Israel Adesanya loves his fights in Australia. His last one was in Sydney. He's been in Perth before as well.
No, he's fought in Melbourne.
He fought in Melbourne. So while Dana White was announcing all the changes to UFC 303, and there's been a lot, from Conor McGregor to Jamal Hill dropping out, to Anthony Smith now being on the card. A lot of changes, whirlwind of changes. In the background of Dana White's video, some smart MMA fans caught a glimpse of what's going to be happening in UFC Perth. There were some fighter names on that list for UFC 305. Some of the names, including, we had Jack Della, which was very weird because he also said that...
Broken arm?
He had a bit of an infection.
In time.
But
I think it was Steve Erceg versus Kairouz.
You could see it in the war room. Israel Adesanya was there. Song Yadong was on the list.
Co-main event.
Jack Della was on the list. Steve Erceg on the list. So some are rumoured to say Steve Erceg versus Kairouz. We also had Daka Close as well, and which means I think Dan Hooker will also be on that card as well. So it's going to be stacked with Aussie and New Zealand fighters. Do you want to see a Steve Erceg versus Kairouz? Pretty much an Anzac fight?
Yeah, definitely. Aussie versus New Zealand is the best rivalry in Australia. No one in Australia likes New Zealanders. Okay. Kairouz, he got a bit of a pop in Sydney. But if we're backing our Aussie boy, we're taking him to knock him out. That
begs the question, though, who else are we going to see on the UFC Perth? It's definitely going to be stacked with Aussie. That's left out people like Jack Jenkins, who I think is going to be on the card. Jake Matthews has put his hand up and said, I want to be on the card as well. Pretty much every Australian fighter wants to make his way onto that card. Who else do you see? Could we see a Volkanovski in UFC Perth?
I think Volkanovski makes sense. He's had a lot of time off since his last fight. He wants another warm-up fight before he fights probably for the title. Holloway versus Topuria has been all but confirmed. So Volkanovski is not going to fight for the title next. So he needs a fight. He's called out Michael Chandler. He's called out Dustin Poirier. I don't know if he's going to get either of those. Yeah. But he could get someone in Perth.
I feel like a tune-up fight in Perth. We already see Tai Tuivasa pretty much confirmed that he's also going to be on the card as well. So a tune-up fight for Volk to get him back into the rhythm. He's been much open to, not having to fight Ilia Topuria next, even though he'd love to. I think he needs a tune-up fight to get back into the swing of things. Probably a featherweight fight. I'd like to see a featherweight fight in Perth for Volk.
It wouldn't make sense for him to go up if he's still planning to go for the title. I mean, I know he can fluctuate weight easily. He's proven that, dropping 12 kilos in 12 days. But it doesn't mean you should be going up in weight to fight. You're 0-2 in your division above. Stay in your own division. Find someone that can just get your confidence back up. first Topuria or Holloway when that fight's finished and get the title.
Well, listen, you'd have the Aussie crowd behind you, fight a featherweight, contender, and kind of get back into the swing of things. Look what Robert Whittaker's done. He's kind of rejuvenated. That's what Volk needs to kind of, I think, get back into the swing of things in that division. And I'm not saying take a massive fight, but it's probably time to announce now. We're about 2 months out from Perth. It'd be great to see him in Perth.
It's always hard with fighters creeping up in age. Once you reach 34, 35, you're thinking about the end of your career, and then really the titles aren't, like, once you've had a long tenure as a title, like, you don't want to have that activity anymore. You don't want to be, I mean, maybe Volkanovski does. He always says, like, when he's not training, that's when he finds it the hardest. So maybe he does want to be an active champion again, but at that age, man, it's just not worth it.
Okay, looking at UFC 303, okay, happened 2 weeks ago. Alex Pereira getting called in as the main event, again being Dana's guy, stepping up on short notice. It was after Conor McGregor announced that he was out. He was finally out. There's been more news to that now. He's confirmed it was a broken pinky toe. He showed it, very bruised.
Looked heavily bruised. It was purple.
It was purple. But does that... A lot of people have called into question when he was going at DeSanjos for having a broken toe and say, look, if you take an X-ray on me right now, I don't know if you remember this old clip, I'm battered and bruised everywhere, your fight hurt. Is it a bit hypocritical from Conor McGregor not stepping up? Honestly, I kind of feel bad for Michael Chandler because a bruised pinky toe, and that's costing you the main event of UFC 303.
The only issue is Conor McGregor has so many times before fought hurt. He's done the job, and the last time he fought hurt, he fractured his shin bone in half.
And it's on the same shin. It's on the same side, same leg, same
If you're
pinky
Conor
toe.
McGregor, you deserve to proceed with caution. You deserve the right to say, look, I want to be 100% in my return. I don't want to come in and not be able to plant my left foot down with 100% confidence. I've already got the bad shin. I've already got the weak leg. I'm not taking any chances. So Conor McGregor, whether it's hypocritical or not, he's the one person that's allowed to do that. Because, yes, he's called out people before for minor injuries like this, but they didn't have the major injuries right before that. So Conor McGregor, do whatever you want. Just make sure you come back and fight.
Well, I don't know what's next for Conor McGregor. He's saying he's eyeing a return in August or September. Dana White has said, look, they're not going to create a separate pay-per-view for him. He's either going to have to jump on in that card in September.
I don't believe him.
And I don't think he's going to be in Australia in August because that'd be a waste of Conor McGregor. So I think you're probably going to see Conor McGregor at the Spear. If not, it's going to be later in the year.
I think they're going to make a pay-per-view for him. The fact that Helwani has said it, that guy's got great mail. If he's putting that out there, it's going to happen. He's not going to fight in Utah 307. They don't need him at the Sphere, and he's not going to fight in Perth. So he's just going to get sandwiched in between there unless they hold him out till December, and that's when he could possibly fight in Vegas.
Well, I think after he announced his injury, everyone on Twitter has been burying him. Every fighter wants a piece of Conor McGregor. Even so, Ilya Topuria went on Twitter, gave his reasons why he's a coward, then called him a bitch, okay, for dropping out of the fight. Michael Chandler has even gone back and forth with him. I think everyone still wants a piece of the McGregor pie, and that's why they're going at Twitter and calling him out, because it's not a guarantee that he fights Michael Chandler next.
Mate, break out the red panties. That's why you want to fight Conor McGregor, because it's the money fight. Imagine the ticket sales, the gate sales, the viewership. There's so much you get from fighting McGregor. Of course, if I'm Ilya Topuria, I'd be calling him out every day of the week.
Yeah, so
I don't think Conor McGregor can drop back down to that weight division, but Topuria, you're smart. Keep yourself relevant.
Well, you got to think, if Topuria goes on to beat Max Holloway, who's the rumored next fight, he's in contention of big money fights. He's a massive star in Spain right now, and I think he's just doing that. He's putting in that work to drum up that potential McGregor fight down the line.
Well, Topuria, there's been comparisons now between him and McGregor. The fact that the age that they won it at, the knocking out the world-class champion.
Same come up.
But now they're going, they got the same, they got the similar chest tattoo, they got the similar back tattoo. He's basically mimicked Conor McGregor. He's trying to be him.
McGregor's called him a rat recently as well on a live stream. They're kind of gone at each other. So look, it's something there. I think Topuria just needs to get those stats up on his career. He needs to build his resume up before.
If Topuria beats Holloway and becomes the BMF title, then he could probably face McGregor for the BMF at a different weight than the actual division that is the champion.
Well, I'm saying now that Pereira has taken that fight on short notice, is he now the face of the UFC? Again, we've called him the MVP of the UFC. He takes his fight, saves the main event of UFC 303. If not, Conor McGregor, obviously been inactive. Is Alex Pereira the face of the UFC?
No, definitely not, because he can't speak English. If you cannot speak English, you cannot be the face of the UFC. Islam has said this before. If you want to make money, you have to learn English. It's as simple as that. Pereira has been great. He's been a superstar from the activity of his fights.
Yeah.
But he can't talk. He can't sell the fights.
I will say he's a pay-per-view draw. And like I said, he went, and he's shown that because he's taken these main event spots. He did it at Madison Square Garden. He's doing it now with Prochazka again. People tune in, and you saw the turnout for him in Australia. He's got a massive fan base here in Australia. Not necessarily, you don't have to necessarily talk English. He sells fights, and he's one of the most entertaining fighters on social media. You got Sharma, you got that, okay? You've also got the skits that he's been doing with Glover, the skits he's been doing with Nina. I'm not going to come out and say he's a bigger draw than Sean O'Malley or he's a bigger draw than Conor McGregor, but as of right now, who draws up to him in terms of pay-per-view draw and social media attraction right now? Who's on his level?
Adesanya is still a bigger superstar.
Who hasn't fought in over a year.
He's fighting this year. John Jones is the bigger superstar.
Again, who hasn't fought in nearly over a year.
I would say Islam's a better superstar. He can market and sell his fights better. I'm not sure what the pay-per-view numbers, how they match up, but I still think he's a better superstar.
I think if you're talking about someone marketable to casual fans, people that want to tune in and buy a pay-per-view, I don't think Islam matches up to Alex Pereira, even though his resume is great. He's the current champ.
I'm not denying.
You're talking about a 2-division champ, okay, who's very dangerous, being the reliable UFC guy. I think he's neck and neck with Sean O'Malley and Israel Adesanya right now.
I'm saying he's definitely on their level, but the fact that he can't speak English just prohibits him from being considered the face. He's definitely one of the biggest superstars. I'd probably even say top 3, but he's not the face. And because he's not marketed as the face, he's definitely been the MVP this year. No contesting that. If you're talking like if there's a
activity, if there's 300 and then 303, and then he'll probably fight again towards the end of the year.
If they're doing like a Fighter of the Year award, he gets that far and away because of the activity. He's a company man and he's doing whatever is asked of him. So you can give him that, but face of the UFC, I'm not there yet.
I think we were robbed, us Aussies, of him actually appearing in Perth. That was heavily rumoured.
Well, he was touring Australia for what? I mean, it was obviously to maybe promote a fight possibly down the line in Perth.
Okay, so I'm going to say not the face yet, but definitely can make a case for him being one of the stars in the UFC right now. Let's go to our UFC top 5. Every week we're going to be bringing you a combat sports top 5. This week's top 5 fights on short notice.
At number 5, Justin Gaethje versus Tony Ferguson in 2020. Now this came after Khabib and Tony Ferguson fight got called off for about the 4th time.
Yeah.
Tony Ferguson, in well-respected fashion, the only way Tony Ferguson could, says, I'm still going to fight. I want to fight Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje gets the call up on 6 weeks' notice, comes in and absolutely destroys Tony Ferguson, dismantles him. It was one of the worst showings, one of the most one-sided fights I've ever seen in my life. And this was the start of Tony Ferguson's losing streak. That's what makes this so significant. Tony Ferguson, I think, has now lost 7 fights in a row, and this was the first one.
Number 4, John Jones versus Shogun Rua. This is John Jones, 21 years old, becoming the youngest UFC title holder. This probably changed the landscape of UFC, right?
21-year-old champion. This was the first fight, the first title fight for John Jones.
It was the first title fight for John Jones on 5 weeks' notice, not the shortest of notice, but again, he goes on to win this fight at 21 years old, becoming one of the youngest UFC champions at the time.
The youngest UFC champion.
And this kind of started the trajectory of the GOAT. And if he doesn't take this fight on short notice, who knows how John Jones' career pans out. Obviously, he's had his ups and downs throughout his career, but taking this fight, winning the title, becoming the youngest champion of all time.
At number 3, Michael Bisping versus Luke Rockhold II. On 10 days' notice, Michael Bisping had lost to Rockhold 2 years prior. The lead up to this fight, Michael Bisping was talking so much trash. The title fight had eluded him his whole career. And on 10 days' notice, he came into the octagon, hit Rockhold with one of the most beautiful left hooks of all time, and conquered the championship. On 10 days' notice, it's hard to take a title fight. And then you add in the factor of Michael Bisping, who had never won the title, had such an illustrious career, always remained in the top 10, and finally won the title. It was just such a cherry on top for his career, and one of the best short notice fights of all time.
Ariel Helwani takes a little bit of credit for this fight as well, because he was getting whispers that the fight was going to be off. He put feelers out to Michael Bisping and said, hey, you should put your hand up for this fight. He ends up taking it on, 10 days' notice?
10 days' notice.
And then goes on to win the champion. Probably one of the best short notice fight, Cinderella story for Michael Bisping, and then finally gets it done.
Getting revenge on Rockhold, completing the Cinderella title story, it just had everything.
Number 2, we're going with Diaz versus McGregor. Now, this again was on 11 days' notice, probably took the UFC world by storm, and was one of the biggest upsets in UFC history.
Well, going into this fight, Conor McGregor was supposed to be fighting for a 2-division championship. He was supposed to be double champ. Dos Anjos pulls out of the fight, and Nate Diaz, off the couch, drinking beer, enjoying the Mexican sun, says, I'll back up, I'll fight Conor McGregor. Now, Nate Diaz had previously calling him out, but Nate Diaz was getting pieced up early. He was getting absolutely belted, and then somehow he outlasted McGregor in the cardio and puts him to sleep.
Well, the thing was, this then set up McGregor versus Diaz 2 and the trilogy that everyone wants. It's become one of the biggest UFC rivalries in the sport, and it all started from this fight on 11 days' notice. So much respect from Nate Diaz from Stockton for taking the fight and then going on to choke him out and winning the fight.
It is, when people think of the UFC, they got Daniel Cormier versus John Jones, Nate Diaz versus McGregor. It's one of the most iconic rivalries of all time, and it's built off an 11-day notice fight.
And number 1, we're going with Volkanovski versus Islam 2. This one, obviously, we're biased because we're Australian, but this probably started the memes online of Volk taking everything on short notice. This was Volk becoming the short notice king. It was one of the most ballsiest things as well. It was the same time when the UFC Abu Dhabi was kind of up in the air. Usman took a fight on short notice, and then Volk puts his hand up to fight one of the scariest prospects in the UFC, Islam, on 11 days notice. Unheard of. The biggest balls in the UFC. Yes, he went on to get knocked out by a brutal head kick, but at the time, cutting weight on 11 days notice, cutting 12 kilos, then going on to face Islam, didn't look too bad until he took that head kick, and who knows how his career pans out after that.
Well, just strictly for the memes. He's now, any situation ever. Someone needs to go to the altar and get married. Someone needs to come in and do a job for someone. Someone needs to play basketball. Volkanovski is the short notice call-up king.
Yeah.
Strictly for that reason, this fight's number 1. Volkanovski will forever be remembered for taking a fight on short notice, which is the reason why it's number 1.
And it's sad that it did go down that way. But 8 months prior, he put on a spectacle with Islam in Perth. That some say he almost went on to win that fight. And then he was taking that risk, said, listen, I want to be known as the person that takes that risk, puts myself out there, takes his fight on short notice, and forever is the short notice king.
I know it only happened in last October, but UFC 300, main event needed a short notice fight. Volkanovski's name's getting thrown up. Conor McGregor versus Chandler gets called off. Volkanovski's name's getting thrown in the hat. He is the short notice king. That's why he's number 1.
Okay, that's our top 5. That's our top 5 UFC short notice fights of all time. I'm sure there's going to be more to come because the crazy world of the UFC, they're always changing fights in that war room. Great documentary.
Hey, you seen the documentary?
On UFC Fight Inc. Great documentary. I'd recommend it. Hunter Campbell really running the show there.
Just make sure you have a good VPN because it's very hard to watch in Australia.
Yeah. Get a VPN. But Dana will definitely find you. Okay, I want to touch on boxing. I know we're pushing late, but Ryan Garcia has pretty much been suspended for a year.
It's up in the air. I know. I keep saying he's tested positive. He hasn't tested positive. His pre-fight test came back negative. His post-fight test came back negative. So what's happening? I don't know.
Right now, Devin Haney's doing a victory lap, and he's taking to social media saying he's still undefeated. Everyone on social media is looking at Devin saying, listen, mate, relax. You got pissed up. You got embarrassed. Stop celebrating. Pretty much, if you want to avenge yourself, take a rematch. But he's so much so going so far as to maybe taking legal action against some publications that are saying Ryan Garcia won the fight.
He wants them to take down the videos of him getting absolutely belted by Ryan Garcia. I think he's reached out to DAZN. DAZN said, please shut your mouth, Devin. He's reached out to YouTube and said, please remove highlights of this fight. Like, you still got bashed. People aren't going to forget it. Okay, yes, there might be some questionable activity by Ryan Garcia, but you still lost, okay?
Well, Ryan Garcia has, since after this suspension, pretty much trying every other career. He's been in stand-up comedy. He was up there with Chris D'Elia trying his first stand-up.
Hey, he did okay, and then he decided to shadow box.
He's on the poker table with Neymar, Jimmy Butler, Dan Bilzerian. I don't know how he's in poker, but he won some hands. He was looking all right. People are saying Jimmy Butler didn't want a bar of him there. He's trying different career paths. He said, Dana White, at me. I'm ready to fight in the UFC. So who knows where Ryan Garcia ends up for me. I still think he's the money fight for Devin Haney right now. I don't want to see Devin Haney fight anyone else. And I think it will do just as good as the first fight, pay-per-view wise. Eddie Hearn doesn't want to see that, I think, because Devin Haney's a bit scared.
He doesn't want to fight him
And he doesn't want to fight him again.
He does not want to fight him
Probably
again.
wants to move on. But what is next for Ryan Garcia? I don't know. I think it's got to be a rematch.
The only thing for Ryan Garcia to do now is take big fights. He's caused that much of
The New York State Athletic Commission is saying that he can't fight in the United States. Does that stop him from fighting overseas? Does that stop him from fighting on a potential Saudi card?
I never thought of that.
So I think he was over there for the last Tyson Fury fight. So I think he's got a bit of a relationship with Turk Al-Sheikh there. I'd like to see Ryan Garcia maybe take a big money Saudi fight.
Let's maybe go Ryan Garcia versus Tim Tszyu. just get Tim Tszyu back in the fold. He's already talked to Riyadh Season about fighting in Saudi or fighting in LA. But Ryan Garcia versus Devin Haney, I don't think it's going to happen. Devin Haney's going to be dodging him for the rest of his life.
Well, I think that's the fight that people want to see. It's got to be the rematch. Let's look at UFC 303. International Fight Week is this week. Let's give you our predictions and pretty much the tale of the tape. Starting with Nick, Ian Garry versus Michael Venom Page. Now, I think this fight has gone under the radar. I think it should be one of the most hyped fights on the card. I don't know why it's kind of just flown under the radar here on this card because of the chopping and changing. I think it's one of the most anticipated fights for me personally, maybe because we've seen MVP's first fight. Ian Garry, the fans have kind of turned on him, and he hasn't fought in some time. How do you see this fight going?
I see MVP piecing Ian Garry. I think Ian Garry is known as a great striker, but MVP, from watching his fight against Kevin Holland, he's just so cool, he's so calm, he's so collected. He can do whatever he wants in the octagon. And Ian Garry, there's too much outward pressure on him. Nah. He's so scared of Twitter. He's so scared of people calling him names, calling out his wife. He's got too much on his mind to focus on the octagon.
I think it's kind of past all that scrutiny of being a cuck and, you know, I know his wife's going to probably be in attendance, but I actually think Ian Garry has a point to prove. I don't know who needs the win more. MVP, obviously being his second fight, wants to go on, you know, be in contention for the title. So much so he's even talking about a potential fight against Kamaru Usman, who's pretty much ranked 1 in the division. I think Ian Garry, with the point to prove, he said he never wanted to fight down in the rankings. He doesn't want to lose this fight. I think he's going to be too good, especially in close range. Okay, he can close that distance with Michael Venom Page. And I think he's going to be able to wrestle him, something that Kevin Holland's not really known for. And he was able to wrestle and take Michael Venom Page to the ground. So I think Ian Garry wins this fight. I think he goes all the way to decision.
I think Ian Garry definitely needs the win more, just from the outward pressure. He needs to shut people up. He needs to get some wins up. There's been a lot of hype surrounding Ian Garry, especially before he was considered a cuck. Yeah. He was considered the next big thing in the division. So he definitely needs the win more.
Full credit to Michael Venom Page. Hasn't been going at the wife. Hasn't been going at, you know, the easy low-hanging fruit. He's saying, listen, I'm one of the baddest people in this division. I'm going to beat him. The only reason why I want to knock this bloke out is because he said I was an easy fight and Kevin Holland would smoke me. So he's not going at the wife. He's not going at the easy Colby Covington, just take jabs at him. He wants to let his fight do the talking and then move on to hopefully a bigger fight in Kamaru Usman or, you know, another welterweight contender.
I think Michael Venom Page wants the win. And, you know, the fact that he's not taking the low-hanging jabs makes me respect him a bit more.
Okay. Anthony Smith versus Diaz. Who do you take?
I'll take Anthony Smith.
Okay, this fight has been changed more than anything on the card, right? This fight's been changed more than 3 times. I don't even know if it's worthy even being on the main card. It probably could be main eventing the prelims. But again, I don't know about this fight. It could kind of be up in the air. Anthony Smith, not that he's proven anything lately.
He's a veteran.
Diaz, I think, is coming off a 3-fight winning streak.
Actually, you know what? I switched my thing. If you've got more than 10 losses in the UFC or in MMA, you're not winning any more fights. That's it. If your record's reading 38-19, you're done. Okay, I'll take the guy with 3 losses. It looks like he's got more. He's more hungry. He's got more to prove.
Anthony Smith hasn't knocked anyone out since Glover Teixeira. So again, I'm going to take. I'm taking Diaz here. I don't know if it's going to be by knockout. But quite frankly, I don't think it's going to be the fight of the night or anything like that. So I'm going there. Who do you like next? Ortega or
Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez? Yeah. I'm going with the mullet. I'm just become a fan of the mullet. I love the stuff he's doing with Nina. If you look like that, you're basically an Aussie, so I'll take Diego Lopez. Brian Ortega, again, he's spoken about going up in weight. He had a fight scheduled in the next weight division. He's over this division. He's just taking this fight because Dana's promised him some money. I'll take Diego Lopez.
He definitely is committed to moving up. I don't think he wants to fight in this division.
So what's the point of the fight
But
then?
In saying that, I think it's going to be the fight of the night. It's like it has the potential. I mean, look, Prochazka versus Pereira, definitely that's just going to be a striking fest. But this has potential to be an all-out war as well. And look, I think the winner from here goes on to face Volkanovski.
Possibly.
I don't think it's going to be a quick turnaround. And
Lopez is talking about wanting a title fight. He wants a title fight. So if that's not going to be the result of this fight, then I don't think he versus Volkanovski.
Ortega's on a bit of a redemption run in his career. But like I said, if Lopez, who's the favorite, goes on to win, I think Volkanovski's definitely in contention for his next fight.
Maybe. But now looking at the main event, Pereira versus Prochazka 2. This is the hardest fight to pick. The first one, I couldn't pick him apart. I wanted Pereira to win just because I'm a big fan of his. But Jiri, in the light heavyweight division, he's the boogeyman. No one wants to really fight him because he's so unorthodox. Everything that does, the way he fights is just so weird.
Listen, when he's putting out Thanos after credits threats to fighters in the mountains, and he's calling out, he's one of the scariest fighters in the division. Like I said, this division's in kind of a disarray. But in saying that, I think Pereira gets it done here. He's done it before. Again, Prochazka coming in on short notice. I think the game plan from Pereira is tenderize his leg with leg kicks, okay, like he did in the first fight, okay, and then he's just going to come in, close the distance, and really just kind of go swinging for the fences. I think this fight is a guaranteed TKO finish. I can't really split them. It could go either way, but I'm going to lean towards Alex Pereira TKO.
The fact that Pereira got the kind of early stoppage in the last fight should provide a bit more motivation to Prochazka. He'll fight a bit more smart. He'll be much smarter in the way he approaches Pereira. I don't think Pereira has the ability to take him on the ground. And, you've seen Prochazka do that against Glover. He loves to be able to take advantage of the weaknesses of other fighters. So I'll take Jiri here. I think is he the favourite? Who's the favourite in this fight?
Favourite is Alex Pereira. Jiri
well, then
Prochazka,
I'll take
outsider.
the underdog. I'll take the underdog all day.
You're taking Prochazka at $2.45.
It's worth the money. You got to take the value here. The value is he's probably the better fighter. If you looked at them objectively, better overall fighter is Prochazka.
In saying that, let's go with our best picks for UFC 303. Now, mine personally is Alex Pereira to win by TKO. You can get that around $2. And I also like Ian Garry by decision. Ian Garry is the favourite at $1.70. You can take him head-to-head in the fight. But I like Ian Garry going the distance. And you saw Michael Venom Page's last fight. Went to decision against Kevin Holland. Some saying if you're a knockout artist, you should probably be putting someone to sleep. I think Ian Garry, like his previous fight, just does the job, does what he needs to get done, and wins by decision. Okay,
well, I'm going to directly fade you. I'm taking MVP into Jiri Prochazka. Both of them at, $2, $2.40. You probably get $5 on that multi. That's great value. 2 fighters, 2 winners. That's all you need. That's a very easy multi. Great value. $5. Take that.
Lastly, going to the world of WWE, they just announced a multi-year deal with Indianapolis. They're bringing the biggest events there. WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, SummerSlam.
2-night SummerSlam. Why?
They're just, obviously it's going to be a commercial success like how WrestleMania was. But we had 2 massive returns and debuts this week. I want your thoughts on them. Who had the better appearance last week in WWE? Uncle Howdy or Jacob Fatu?
The fact that Uncle Howdy shot dead
Chad Gable.
Yeah. Probably gives him the edge here. Jacob Fatu, they called, what was the name?
The Samoan Werewolf.
The Samoan Werewolf.
WWE trademarked that. I think it might be for Gunther. I don't know.
I think the fact that he's come into the bloodline, that's still the most intriguing storyline in the WWE. I'll give a slight edge there. Uncle Howdy, the Wyatt 6, they've been teasing it for so long.
Look, I'm going to say because of the build-up and how long they teased Uncle Howdy for, the way they cinematically shot that, I think it was the perfect debut for the faction. Jacob Fatu, to me, I think he's got a lot to prove. It just looks like he's another Tongan or Samoan that's just come out. They're coming out of the woodwork. Who knows who's coming next? I think Zilla Fatu, they've got all these Polynesian kids they're breeding.
They're cousins.
Until they solidify this faction with some wins, I'm not going to be sold on it. Don't get me wrong, he went straight for Cody Rhodes, put him through a table. It was frightening. And this guy looks like an athletic freak. Looks like he could play in the front row for New South Wales next week and also be an offensive lineman in the NFL. The guy's a freak, and you've seen the highlights of what he can do.
He's an athlete.
He's a high-flying Samoan.
And I like that he's actually a Fatu. He's actually part of the family.
Yeah, definitely the Rikishi bloodline. But again, you can see flying off the top rope onto a table. The guy's an athletic freak. Who knows? Opens up so many feuds. But I'm a bit more excited about Uncle Howdy and how they're going to pay homage to Bray Wyatt and who's his first feud going to be.
Uncle Howdy was supposed to come when Wyatt was still alive. So that's kind of, I've still got that excitement from then.
Yeah.
And, depending what he does and how they take the character, it's going to be Bray Wyatt 2.0. It's going to be, what is his character called? I can't remember, I'm blanking.
Who?
The Fiend. It's going to be the Fiend 2.0 as well.
Yeah.
So we'll take them both. It's great that they're on separate rosters. It's good, exciting
with the immediate
times.
impact and with The Rock, if he's pulling the strings and where Roman Reigns is right now, I am more excited about the Bloodline story. So I'm going with Jacob Fatu.
That's good.
But that brings an end to Trash Talk Episode 1. Make sure you stay tuned. Subscribe at Kairouz Bros on YouTube and make sure you're liking and commenting on the clips. Give us your MMA hot takes where you can. That's all for Trash Talk today. Back to you in the studio, Ryan.